So today I'll be talking about the power of having a speak-up culture, having environments where employees' voice is welcome, and it's really good for business.
Wow.
What? Okay. Red light means we're on. And we're live. We're live. We're live. We're here.
We're here. We're live.
Live from our basements. Hello, LinkedIn universe. So good to have so many of you here. Hello, everyone. Steven Shadletsky here. Delighted to be with you again.
The music.
That's our cue. That's our
Groovy.
cue.
I like it.
Let's see how long we can keep this going for.
I can keep this going forever. Just so you know.
Just keep it awkward. All right, we're here with Henna Pryor. It's me, Shed. I'm so delighted to be with you and to be with you, Henna. As you're joining us, please feel free to hop into the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. Something awkward you've done today. And if you're like, I haven't, you're lying. We all do. So I'm delighted to have Henna here. Henna has a book coming out next week. 7 days.
1 week.
Yeah,
Tuesday of next week.
Yeah. So Henna's book, Good Awkward, comes out next week in 7 days. Mine comes out the week after, October 3rd, Speak Up Culture. And so first and foremost, the very way that Henna and I met was delightfully awkward. I felt like you and I were like circling each other on social media. I'm like, who is this Henna person? Like all of my like amazing, wonderful other author speaker friends know her. And like, we kind of did this like awkward dance where we like laughed at each other's comments. And then it's like, all right, who's going to reach out first? And then we spoke and then we're like, yes, you are awesome. And now we're here. So that's my version of the story. What is yours?
Yeah, identical, plus the addition of this dude's nickname is that of an outdoor structure. And I just love that a lot. And I need to understand who he is and what he's about.
Amazing. Our dear friend Steven Shapiro is here. Welcome, Shap. As others are joining, please hop in. Let us know where you are joining us from. And again, something awkward you've done today. Henna, you have a giveaway going on right now. I saw amazing like packaging and box. I'm like, ooh, author envy, like delicious, love it. And your giveaway going on right now is to post just this, an awkward story, right? Or awkward workplace story. Can you like set up the giveaway?
Sure.
Because I formally want to enter.
Yeah. Oh, I'm actually sort of bummed that I don't have the really dope Yeti in front of me because I'd lift it up. But no, the giveaway is simple. What I'm trying to create is some normalization of the fact that we all have awkward moments at work. And so on my LinkedIn post and on my Instagram, there's a giveaway running where it's this big old swag bag. You know, we got the book, we got the Yeti, we got everything. But all I'm asking people to share is, what was one of your most awkward moments at work? And what's funny, and I get this all the time. So I've actually been getting texts too from people who haven't yet commented their own, but they're reading them going, oh my God, it's not just me. Oh my God, it's not just me. And that's where I think awkwardness is such a unique emotion, because in the moment that we're having that feeling, we think it's just us until you realize, my Lord, no, it is not. It is everyone to varying degrees and to varying levels of cringe, but it's fun reading everybody else's thoughts.
Nice. And it's so interesting because, you know, awkwardness is a dance. Like it's in the eye of the beholder of like, we do something and we're like, well, that was awkward, but we don't know if others perceived it as awkward. Similarly, there's stuff that others will do, we perceive as awkward, they may or may not. Like it's such an interesting, you know, proof of the human truth that our perception is our reality.
And I think this is exactly where our work intersects, right? I think people are afraid to speak up for this exact reason. I love that you called this out, and I make a point to call this out early. There's no such thing as factually awkward. Awkwardness is subjective, whether it's a feeling or whether it's a term that you use to describe yourself. You know, it can be a transient state. I feel awkward right now, or people who are like, oh, me, that's me. I'm socially awkward. He's socially awkward. They're socially awkward. There's no such thing as a factually awkward person. It's subjective. It's up to us or them to deem it so, or to deem them so. And so if we start from that truth, You're exactly right. It's a perception. And I think if we can start with that, it makes it a little easier to untangle all the stuff that we attach to it.
Nice. Okay, I have some questions there, which I'll get to. And
Okay.
again, please, hello, Eleanor. Hello, Andy. Thank you for embracing our awkward self-promotion. We're trying to promote each other here, Andy. Let's just
Yeah.
keep it awkward, okay? But
Speaking of
let us know
awkward,
where.
do I get to see who's here? Am I able to do that? I'm like looking. No, only you can see that. Yeah, or can I?
No, we on LinkedIn we can share. Click on
Oh, I can see it
comment
in the
on the right
comments. I
side.
see
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awkward.
So please keep
I
it
didn't
coming.
press the button. Okay, I see it now.
All good. Let us know who else is here and where you're from, as well as you have comments and questions as we go. Please share. We want to make this a conversation. So I have a question after around like the origin of you writing this, and has it been freeing for you in your awkwardness?
Mm,
Before I go there, so I'm just saying that out loud so you help hold me to account. I want
okay.
to share my awkward story.
Yes.
So it isn't about work, but it's about snow skiing. So I love skiing. I love snow skiing. And there was a
Mhm.
time years ago, I was probably in high school, and my dad and I were skiing together, and we would ski at the same hill. So we got to know some of the pejorative term is lifties, but like the lift operators on the chairlift.
Mhm.
And we knew a bunch of them, and they would, we would wear a name tag or a badge, and they would know us anyway. And so it was approaching lunchtime. The conditions were amazing. My dad said, "I'm going to go in. I'm going to take a break and go in for lunch." And I said, "I'm going to stay out and do one or two more runs." And it was the perfect time to ski because everyone was going in for lunch, so the
Right.
hill was empty. And so I'm like, great, I'm gonna rip down. No one's in the way. I'm gonna take a couple runs. There was no lines on the chairlift line, so I literally finished a run down a steep hill, went right through the line with nobody there, caught a chairlift just as it was coming around, like it was
Yeah.
perfect. And
Mhm.
the lift operator goes, "Hey, Steve, how are you?" And I was moving my things so quickly that I attempted to say, "Good, how are you?" But it came
Yeah.
out as "Good, you." Anyway, just
I
a
love,
good.
but I love that you still remember that.
Oh, very
Like
well.
the power of those moments, the fact that that was such a blip in your life, but you still remember that. I love
It was
that.
probably 20 years ago, and I tell that
Yeah.
story to my kids, and I said
Yeah.
it, and I felt embarrassed and awkward, and I just laughed at myself
Sure.
hilariously for the 8-minute chairlift ride up, and then couldn't wait to tell my dad. So anyway, that's one of
Yeah.
my good awkward moments.
I love
Um,
it.
Great. Andy is joining us from Perth, Australia. Great. Thanks for joining us, Andy. That's fantastic. And please keep it coming, all. Okay, so question for you.
Yes.
What was the like like, I think I want to be queen of awkward. Like there's this universal feeling that
Mhm.
everyone has, but few talk about. So I'm curious around like your origin story for I've got a book here.
Yeah.
And has this been a freeing experience for you? Like, is this the type of thing where your vulnerability around awkwardness has made it easier, better for you to show up and be you?
So I'll answer the questions in flipped order. Has it been freeing? God, yes. Like, God, yes. I think authors write the books that they themselves wish they could have read, right? Like, I am 100% writing to my younger self, to my previous self, who, my name is Henna. I was born in the early 80s. I wanted to be Samantha or Jessica or Jennifer so badly. Like, Henna, God, why, parents? Why would you do this to me? By the way, this was the height of Hanna-Barbera. So that was also fun. Like, that's not even my name, but like
Yeah.
that's where we were. And I think, like many immigrant kids, my story was one of desperately wanting to assimilate. I didn't want to be different. My clothes were a little funny. My food in my lunchbox was not white bread, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It was like, aromatic, like masala spiced things that my mom made for me. And the me I desperately wanted to show the world was constantly clashing with the me that people actually saw. So there wasn't a day that went
Mm.
by where I didn't feel impossibly awkward, either the way I was showing up, the way I was speaking, what I was saying. I mean, I had an accent up until grade school, English wasn't my first language. So my awkwardness story is really an origin story. I felt awkward my whole life, but I'll just jump to my professional interest in the topic.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
a quick question there? So
Yeah.
were you trying to change who you were to fit in and be someone else? Like, is that what you're saying?
I think if I can put words to this now, which I couldn't have identified this at the time, I performed a lot.
Mm,
I did a lot of performing. It was really important to me to earn the approval of my peers, definitely, in those formative teenage years. But even in high school, once I got to college, it was only a ways into college that I think I started to shake off this need for putting on a version of myself that I thought would be liked and palatable to the masses. But it took me a long time. I definitely fed my entire internal identity based on what I thought other people wanted from me. I looked externally for who I was often.
okay, so you're going into professional journey. So that's
Yeah.
definitely origin story.
Yeah.
I'm curious again for those middle
Yeah.
years, elementary, high school, but yeah, so keep
Yeah.
going.
It felt awkward throughout all of those. There's the short version. And I got to college, started to find some folks that embraced their jagged edges a little bit more. And I think I started to see the freedom in that. But in my professional life, I'll tell you, just the interest in it professionally began when, like many of us in the personal professional development space, we all love Brene Brown. I love her too. And I
Mhm.
remember in the end of her podcast, she started having this little tagline: stay awkward, brave, and kind. She
Mm,
would say, stay awkward, brave, and kind. And every time I heard that, I had this very visceral, full body reaction of, I know how to stay brave. I know what that's about.
mm,
I know how to stay kind. My parents taught me that one. Stay awkward? No, thank you. I've been trying to stop
mm,
being that my whole life. What do you mean, stay awkward? And it
mm.
just created this curiosity into this emotion that we all experience in life, but especially at work. And no one had seemed to properly do a deep dive into. And that's what led to this, the whole thing.
Nice. I'm thinking of another awkward story because why not?
Yeah. Yeah.
My very first day at my very first corporate job ever, big multinational company,
Hmm.
um, uh, oil and gas. So, not that I love the industry, but it was a rotational leadership development program, and I love leadership. I neglected to
Yeah.
ask them how, and I neglected to ask them how they define the term. Mistake.
Uh, eh,
Um, But on my first day, so I did training with my predecessor for the first morning on
mhm.
stuff, and then um, we went down to the cafeteria for lunch. And when we went down, I saw someone in HR who had been instrumental in my onboarding journey and in my hiring journey, female, um, uh, in like 30, attractive. But I went
Mhm.
up and I'm like, I was so grateful to see her. I was so thankful for the help that she provided. And I gave her a hug as I thought would be appropriate. And it was like hugging a wooden pole, like one of
Yeah.
the like telephone. And I was like, well, that was weird. Probably the worst hug of my entire life. And then I sat down, and the guy who was training me, his name was Matt. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "We don't hug
Mhm.
here." And I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be a problem." Anyway,
Mm.
that's just another
Yeah.
story that comes to mind.
Yeah.
I do want to say, I believe, speaking of awkward, we might be having some tech issues with LinkedIn in particular. So if you
Okay.
are on LinkedIn and having issues, hop over to either Facebook. Ale, can you give me a thumbs up if we're also on YouTube or no? We're not on YouTube. Okay. So if for some reason this is crashing and not working, good luck and reload. We are on Facebook as well. You can search for my name and find us on Facebook. We'll also have the recording of this up on YouTube, I do believe and hope.
Yes.
Actually, no, for sure we will. So sorry for those if you're having any tech issues. Ali, anything else to mention there? Or is that good? Okay. I'm awkwardly speaking to Alejandro on my team who's behind the scenes. Okay. So there's another fun, awkward story for you,
Yeah.
Henna.
You know what I love about that story, and I think maybe this is a good time to give a quick definition in the context of the way we're using it today is, awkwardness is an emotion that we feel when the person we believe ourselves to be, so our true self, is momentarily at odds with the person that they see on display. So we tend to feel
So
awkward
good.
when the person we believe we are is different than the person that for that moment or for those moments they see. So you, Shed, are somebody who likes to think I can read cues. I can tell what's appropriate in the workplace. That's the type of person I am. And for a moment, it's like, this dude doesn't get it. This
Yep.
dude is just going all in without reading the room, right? And so there's a little bit of dissonance there. There's this gap between this version of you and that version of you. And that's when we feel that emotion of awkwardness.
Yeah. So good. Um, uh, I'm gonna pull on the thread of Brene Brown's work for a couple reasons.
Yeah.
Because I saw a recent clip of hers. It was done on like TikTok or something, so it's not the most research-based clip I'll ever quote.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I want to also, Brene also uses the word rumble, which I think is actually a really nice intersection between our work. So
Yeah.
the clip that I saw, again, I don't know the research behind this, but what Brene found in the research is that the opposite of belonging is fitting in, which I thought was so interesting, which isn't necessarily intuitive, but as you unpack it, it kind of makes sense that I think when we belong or when we feel as though we belong, I think it's the opposite of your definition of awkward. It's the person we perceive ourselves to be is the person that we feel as though we're showing up. There's a
Yeah.
cultural fit or add or it's generative.
Yeah.
Fitting in is, I think, your definition of awkward. It's sort of often because of external or internal pressure, molding or changing who we are so that we are accepted or fit in. And I thought that's so interesting. I'd love your take on that. And then we can speak about
Yeah.
Rumble as well.
No, I love that. And here, awkward confession, Shed and I, because we've been so, head down to the ground trying to launch our own books, we have not fully read each other's books. So I don't think we know exactly which research the other has dug into. But what you're describing, it speaks to research that I included in the book around Francesca Gino and her team at Harvard did something around catering and performing. And so fitting in, I think in the way that you're describing it, it's a way to catering meaning performing to meet someone else's expectations. So there's research that their team did that found that catering, performing to meet someone else's expectations, actually in many contexts makes you less strong in your performance, less effective. So it was they did a pitch competition. It was like 166 entrepreneurs. They were trying to get funding from investors, and they found that catering to meet others' expectations actually made you 3 times less likely to get the funding versus coming in fully organic, stumbles, fumbles, awkwardness, missteps, and all. Now, that doesn't mean you come in unprepared, right? Like we need to be clear about this isn't an implication that ineptitude is welcome in the room, but pretending to be whoever you think you want, that people want you to be, actually has a dangerous ramification on the way we show up at work. And I think that's where fitting in and catering sort of meet in the middle. It's got that same adverse effect.
Yeah, love that. This you also make me think. So Adam Grant references research in his book Give and Take on. I mean, you're speaking to authenticity, as we want people to show up as they are with their humanness and human mess and humanity. And in fact, oftentimes when we hear a speaker or a salesperson who's like polished, you're like, what's their angle? Versus when you do show some ums or mistakes or awkwardness or realness, you actually can engender and create more trust, which I think is really, really interesting. You're also a 2-time TED speaker. My
TEDx, I was told. TEDx, yes.
Pardon me. Sorry, lords. Lord Ted. But what I've found about the TED and TEDx community, which I think is really refreshing, is it's not about being polished or perfect. At least what the TED and TEDx audiences and creators and event hosts value. It's not about being perfect, polished, or sharing your book. It's
Yeah.
about sharing a fresh idea, um,
Yes.
taking a risk, being bold, being vulnerable. Of course, it being fact-based and research-based, but
Right.
the currency of TED is their tagline: "Ideas worth sharing," which
Yes.
I so love and is so refreshing.
Yeah.
I just heard we had parent-teacher night, curriculum night at our kids' school last night, and my
Yeah.
son's kindergarten teacher literally delivered a TED talk. It was so good. It was so
Yeah.
unfiltered. It was like a master class in how to be
Yeah.
a parent of a 3, 4, 5-year-old. It was so good. And I went up to her after and I'm like, I want to see your TED talk. And she's like, come on. And I'm like, no, like you were so passionate. You
Mm,
delivered so much value. Like it was beautiful. And like,
yeah.
I want to hear her TED talk. I don't want to hear some polished expert on like the perfect
Yeah.
7 steps. I want to hear yours. So
Yeah.
just a
I
couple
love
of, that's how I view. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this take. And I think where people get tangled up in this, and maybe this is helpful just to call out, is sometimes people hear that, right? They hear, what if I'm not polished and if I'm not perfect, it's going to reflect XYZ way on me. So just to be clear, when we say you don't have to be polished, you don't have to be perfect, we're not giving you a pass to be unprepared.
Mhm.
Right. So this doesn't mean you don't do your homework. This doesn't mean you're not prepared. People who come in for TEDx talks, we're both speakers.
There's a lot.
We
Yeah.
are wildly prepared. In fact, it takes a Herculean amount of preparation to let the polish go, right? To let the perfection go. It's because of that Herculean amount of preparation that I can be more playful. Someone can make me laugh and I snort. Something happens that's like, whoop, didn't expect that to go that way, right? It's because of the preparation that I am able to access those things. Now, there are some rules, right? And I imagine in the speak up culture conversation, it's similar. Sometimes we have to examine our environment. Sometimes we have to examine our level of experience and test for, how much can we push the envelope here? How much can we push against the rings? Those considerations matter across the board. I think in either of our frames of work, we need to keep a little bit of a periphery view as to where are we sitting, what room are we in, and how much of this can we actually call on in that moment.
Beautiful, beautiful. One, my friend Paige here just
Mhm.
highlights your great quote, Henna. I love Henna's earlier statement. Awkwardness is not factual. So good.
Yeah.
Boom. Mic drop. Um, and we're getting some feedback from some that LinkedIn is working. For others, it might not. A couple
Okay.
things. Just to highlight, Ale from my team put in a link to Facebook if that's better for you. So you can click that as well. For some reason, awkward, embrace it. This short LinkedIn link works to get here. So we wish you well. If not, this recording will be on LinkedIn and on YouTube.
The
Um,
overlords are just trying to make sure we practice what we preach here. That's
you
all. That's
totally,
what's
yeah.
going.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So on the thread of a Brene Brown term,
Hmm.
this term she uses rumble, which is
Yeah.
essentially, I think, another version of Kim Scott's radical candor. I like calling it candor with care.
Hmm.
Kim Scott's work is about challenging directly and caring personally. And
Yep.
oftentimes in our society, at least, caring personally is the easier one. But when we
Hmm.
care personally and don't challenge directly, it can actually be, showing up as nice as
Yeah.
opposed to kind.
Hmm.
Brene uses the term rumble. So, I think now we're entering into like, ooh, I have a thing to share. How do I, embrace my vulnerability and awkwardness and pursue anyway? Um,
Hmm.
a couple things that you mentioned that made me think of speak up culture. Um, One is there's a brilliant Venn diagram that the comedian Craig Ferguson, I think by accident, created on
Hmm.
when to speak up. And the Venn diagram is: does it need to be said? Does it
Hmm.
need to be said now? And does it need to be said by me? If the
Mm.
answer to all three is yes, go for it, right? Hopefully,
Yeah.
you're in an environment in which it is both safe and worth it to speak up and say the thing that you feel needs to be said. If not, you don't have a speak up culture, and that's a different conversation. But I love that as like a litmus test. The real
Okay.
fun one is this needs to be said. This
Yeah.
needs to be said now. This does not need to be said by me. That's a
Right.
really interesting one.
Yeah.
Where how can we embrace I'll use your word again, the good awkward, and say like, Henna, I know there's something you can share in that appendix slide that you made
Mhm.
with this research and that. And at risk of putting you on the spot, I think that's the perfect time for that because it's going to change the decision that we make. Can you speak to that? And
Yeah.
if we actually do have a speak up culture, it's like, why, thank you. Yes. Um, so that's one thought. And then the
Yeah.
other is, a speak up culture is a spectrum, which we can get to maybe later in the conversation. But I'll pause there. What
Yeah.
do you think? This notion of rumble, this notion of embracing the good awkward of, fear is present, but I'm going to say the thing. What comes up
Yeah.
for you there?
Yeah. Immediately what comes up for me, I love the Venn diagram. I think I've seen you post it on LinkedIn. Like I love that visual of this is the moment where you should run towards it, right? I think
Mm,
my opinion, I'm just going to state it as such. My opinion based on the research is, the does this need to be said and does this need to be said now, I think are easier questions for us to answer. I think the emotion of awkwardness kicks up when we start to really have to answer and face the
mm,
answer of does this need to be said by me? Because when we
mm,
have a fear of potential awkwardness, if this topic, if this thing, if let's say that even if I know in my heart and in my gut it does need to be said by me, but there is a fear of the way that it'll land or the awkward silence that could ensue or the fact that it won't go the way we expect it to, which awkwardness lives in the world of uncertainty, right? Without uncertainty, we wouldn't experience awkwardness. It exists because
mm,
of uncertainty. So I think it's easy for us, even if we have the best intentions of speaking up more often, to create stories in our mind lightning fast, right? Consciously or subconsciously about why it doesn't need to be me. And a lot of that is rooted in the fear of the uncertainty of what sort of emotion may follow it. And so that one's, I
mm.
think, the tough one to wrestle and reckon with if we're trying to speak up more
Interesting.
at work.
Interesting. I also think the time horizon, the like
Mm.
now and what's the right way and the
Hmm.
right
Hmm.
context, that for me, that's also an
Yeah.
awkward inducing. Um, I think one of the best ways to beat that is, hey, I think there's something we need to add into this decision or conversation or project. In truth, I'm not sure if now's the right time.
It's
Um,
great.
I,
Yeah.
I just want to like, it's around this. What do
Hmm.
you all think? And if the room's like, yeah, or if the room's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but like, you're like, okay, cool. And then bookmark it or earmark it. And it's
Right.
licensed to share it, but now's not the right time or folks in the room or whatever it might be
Right. I
virtually.
love that. I love that as a strategy. And maybe just to paint the counterpoint, sometimes again, there may be a feeling, a gut feeling, just a strong pull that now is the right time, but there's a little bit of concern how it will land. One of the most fascinating data points around awkwardness is the avoidance of awkwardness increases awkwardness. And so one of the ways we can hedge against that is to just name it, right? Okay, given this thing that we just talked about, this may be awkward timing, but I just want to say
Yeah.
blank, right? Just
Yeah.
give it that qualifier, acknowledging that maybe this timing could feel clunky. But if you start with that, then it gives a little bit of that breathing room to whatever comes next and
Love
hopefully a
that.
little bit of forgiveness in case the timing was slightly off.
Love that. A buddy of mine, Colin, I've used this term. I don't think I've used it on the live, but I used it before we went on. And he
Yeah.
often says, don't make it weird. And,
I say
and
do
I
I say
think
do make it weird.
yes, but I think what the true message
Yeah.
is the more awkward you try, or the less awkward you try to make an awkward thing, the more awkward it gets.
I love
Potentially.
this topic because 100%. And so chapter 8 in the book, I talk about improv as an awkwardness sort of accelerator, like the exercises of improv. And one of the cardinal rules of improv is the harder you try to be funny, the worse
Mm,
it is. Right? The
yeah.
way you like the more you try to be funny, the worse it is. With improv, it's magic when you are just in that moment and you can react and be agile to whatever uncertainty comes next. That's where the heart of it is. And awkwardness is the same way. The more you avoid it, the more you try to run away from it, the deeper we all feel it in the room, the thicker it feels in the air. So we have to have different models and strategies to lean on in those moments.
Love that. Love that. Thanks, Alejandra, behind the scenes for supporting folks. We do hope that you are still with us. And if you are able to add any further comments or questions you have for Henna, or myself, or just any things that are particularly resonating or aren't resonating that we can
Yeah.
hopefully dig into a little bit more.
Challenge us. Speak up.
Yeah, giddy up. One of the things that I speak about with speaking up that I think you've alluded to is, for me, a speak up culture is a spectrum. So a speak up culture isn't sucking up, and a speak up culture, to your point around lack of preparation, isn't an excuse for awkwardness. That's lack of preparation.
Right.
So speaking up isn't the same as sucking up. And then on the other end of the spectrum, speaking up is not a license to throw tact, decency, respect, situational awareness, or emotional intelligence out the window.
Right.
And speak up culture, much like awkwardness, is a dance of perception, and it's a human dance. Same with speak up is it's a dance between people, whether there's a hierarchy or not. And how can you still, one of the emphases,
That sounds right.
yeah, good. Yeah. I'm just gonna just embrace it. One of the emphases in my book is to reward the behavior and the intent and coach the impact. So if someone does the thing, but they do it awkward, or they do it inappropriately, or they do it without tact or respect, or some of the like values and things that are like bare minimum skin in the game, it's like, thank you for this, and let's also talk about the impact here and your choice of words or your choice of timing or whatever it might be, to reward the behavior you wish to see more of, and provide feedback and coaching on the behavior that you think could be shifted or improved or altered. Pause.
I love that.
Thoughts.
I love that. And I think this is, our work has this in common for sure, because I think what I'm trying to point to too is it's that results only, outcome focused effort that gets us in trouble. And awkwardness, again, it's a social emotion. And so I've lately taken to using language like, improving our social fitness at work, or strengthening our social musculature. And, just like going to the gym, not every workout is like a crush it workout. God knows most of mine are not, but it's about reps. It's about repetitions, same as speaking up. It's about putting in the repetitions, making the behavior more frequent, so that in the moment when it counts, you've done this before. You have some fitness built up. And so I think I couldn't agree more that this effort in the world that we live in now is much more behavior focused, repetition based than outcome. The outcome will be a byproduct for sure if you just keep doing it.
Love that. You've now got me distracted because I'm like, I should work out more.
She's okay. Here, do you want to feel better? I have like chocolate like right next to me, so it's fine.
Oh, now I want chocolate. There was something else on the intersection I wanted to point out that I lost, and that's okay. Anything else, Henna, that we've not yet delved into that you're like, we should really talk about, that's top of mind, either about your book, your work, or intersections that you see as well?
Yeah, I think just, I want to explore this intersection just a tiny bit more. I think when I think about speaking up, right? So especially if you are someone who has struggled to do so in the past, I have not fully read every page, but I know Shed's book is going to give you 1,000 practical and tactical strategies for ways that you can do this. But I would also just encourage you to explore, what are the narratives that you currently hold around, if I don't get this right, the awkwardness that will inevitably ensue from not getting it right. Are you prepared for it? Are you ready for it? Because I think no matter how many phenomenal tools we have in our toolkit, if we have no tolerance for awkwardness, those tools will never be as effective or powerful as they can be. And so if you've never done, the peeling back of the layers or the deep dive into understanding your own relationship with approval, your own relationship with, tolerating awkwardness, being in that
failure.
sort of failure, all these other things, that's a good place to start. And then you can really, the ripple effect of doing it yourself, doing it in teams, doing it in your cultures will just be that much more impactful from that starting point. But I think these two things in combo, again, selfishly, yes, we are good bragging. We are self-promoting. That's my second TEDx is on this, right? The awkwardness of bragging. Yes, Shed and I have written really good books, but I think if you ultimately put these two skill sets together, I mean, you're pretty damn unstoppable. And I think that there's real magic in giving yourself the gift of these skills.
Nice. Have you connected with Lisa Bragg, by the way?
She, it's funny, after I did my second TEDx, she found me online because people were sharing it. And she's like, we both talk about bragging. And then I love it because bragging is awkward for people. It's incredibly difficult. It's a combination of speaking up and sharing your wins specifically, and the awkwardness that typically accompanies speaking up about these positive things. And so I think it's the intersection of our three worlds collectively.
Yeah. Check out Lisa Bragg's book. I think it's called Bragging Rights with 2 G's.
Bragging Rights,
her last name. One of the things that I have delved into a little bit more for me to do, but something that I find really interesting around both good awkward and speaking up is diversity. And like you growing up as woman of color, English wasn't your first language. Like I safeguard very carefully of like speak up is not an order. The conditions have to be right. You have to have a culture that values differing points of view, that encourages people and rewards them, doesn't punish them, doesn't silence, especially when you're in a minority or marginalized group. Like it's so vital and important. I do not wish to claim myself to be an expert in DE&I. I strive to be an advocate and ally of. And like very conscious of I'm male, white skin. Yes, I identify as Jewish. But I don't have some of the same challenges that other folks have in speaking up in cultures because of my gender and because of my race. So that's just another sort of piece of it.
No, I appreciate that. So I want to add 2 things. First of all, and I almost said this at the beginning and I didn't. Here's an awkward moment. I said awkwardness intersects at that intersection of, who we believe ourselves to be, our true selves is kind of, there's a gap between that version and the person on display. I see myself as someone who really prioritizes inclusion. And I realized Shed had his pronouns in his name and I did not include mine. And I was like, should I say something? Should I scramble? Should I do it? I didn't, because honestly, I didn't want to mess with StreamYard. We were like just getting started, but there was this moment there where internally, I honestly, I was like, okay, my 2 selves are at conflict right now. And I feel a way about it. Right. I had to sort of push that away in service of our conversation and moving on, but that 100% happened, and I think it can happen a lot in that context. And the second thing I will say, and I appreciate your lens of everyone's lived experience is different. And one of the things that is true is that when it comes to awkwardness or owning missteps and blunders, there is still, and data backs this up, that for women and BIPOC women, Black, Indigenous people of color, it is still more difficult to embrace awkwardness in all environments because there is still a higher level of being disproportionately scrutinized, where what confidence or competence is sort of still translated to flawlessness for women or women of color. There's an expectation that it still comes across as flawlessness, which is purely a function of the fact that the social and societal and professional norms are still largely built on the shoulders of cisgendered white heterosexual men, right? There just wasn't that many women in leadership for decades. And so that is changing for the better. That is changing, daily for the better. I'm here for it. It has not fully changed. And women are still disproportionately scrutinized when they don't get it right. And especially women of color. So I think that is an important call out. This isn't, like you said, prescriptive for everyone all the time. I think you got to look around and say, is this the right time and place and moment to do so?
Totally. Thank you for that. Are you willing to share the pronouns with which you identify?
Oh, it's she, her would be the pronouns I should have added. So
may I add them for you?
Sure. Can you do that? See, I was afraid I was going to break the computer if I tried to do it. Yay.
The files are in the computer.
Yay.
That's a Zoolander reference for all of you watching. This has been so wonderful. Your book comes out in a week. Good awkward. And
So
share the subtitle again. I love the subtitle.
good awkward, how to embrace. So I have a good webcam, so it's all blurry. How to embrace the embarrassing and celebrate the cringe to become the bravest you.
So good. Cringe meter. You should like make stickers with like a cringe meter.
Oh, it's good. Maybe I
Yeah,
should.
there you go. Eleanor
Okay.
shared, love the avoidance of awkwardness increases
Yeah.
awkwardness. How funny is that? Embrace the awkward, embrace the weird, say the thing. I think it's so freeing. So often, Hannah, when I coach with leaders and they're having a contentious issue or they're grappling with some interpersonal conflict, I pay really close attention when I ask them, what do you want to say? Or what are you thinking? Or blah, 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 blah. And then they say the thing that they should just say
Mhm.
to the other person.
Yeah.
But it requires risk, vulnerability, awkwardness, whatever. And if the thing that's your inner monologue that you'll say to a third party coach or a friend
Yeah.
comes out, like that's the thing you should say to the person, just and say, this is really
Mhm.
hard for me to share and I don't know how this is going to go, but I hope this ends with us actually closer and in a better spot.
Yeah.
Can I embrace some awkward and share a really hard truth for me?
Yeah. I
And
love
it's
that.
like,
I
oh my
love
god,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, and I know, again, just having followed you and been friends with you, I know that, to have a speak up culture requires a degree of vulnerability. And what I try to make the distinction of with awkwardness is awkwardness and vulnerability are very, very closely tied. They're very similar in many ways, but awkwardness is slightly lower on that scale of emotional exposure. So
Mm,
if you cannot tolerate your own awkwardness at work, then true vulnerability is still a bit out of reach. So if
nice.
vulnerability still feels like a stretch, if you're like, I'd like to be a more vulnerable leader, I'd like to create this type of culture, but I'm still having a hard time. I hope that you get there, but get comfortable with your awkwardness first. Just little
Mm,
stumble, little fumble, being imperfect, fumbling over your words. If you can get comfortable with awkwardness first, true vulnerability, not performative, but true vulnerability is within closer reach. But I feel like we have to hit that middle stepping stone first, oftentimes.
love that. So something you may or may not know about me is I grew up with a stutter. I still have a stutter, married a speech
Mm,
therapist. Good frickin' choice.
good choice.
Yeah, more so for my kids. Um, but so I first realized I had a stutter in grade 2. It wasn't that bad. We tried a couple therapies, didn't really take. And I just sort of, for the next 4 years, floated in awkwardness of, I
Hmm.
knew what it felt to be voiceless. I wouldn't speak up in class and amongst friends. I would trip over words or get stuck on words and feel so embarrassed. It wasn't until in grade 6 French class, and I'm Canadian, so
Hmm.
French mandatory up until
Right.
grade 10. Dropped that. But in grade 6 French class, I couldn't pronounce the word très in class, which means very. Like
Right.
très bien is like the third
Yeah.
frequent phrase you learn in French. So I
Yeah.
couldn't pronounce that word. It was at that moment that I knew I needed to get help, because
Mm,
I finally knew that if I don't um, address this thing, it's going to get in my way for my future. I just knew it for some reason. So I went home that night. I shared with my mom what happened, and I'm like, we need help. I ended up going to the Speech and Stuttering Institute that summer
mm.
for like a
Wow.
4 or 6 week camp.
Hmm.
I was the youngest person there by 1 year. There was somebody else who was 14. I was 13. And then everyone else was older. There was a 19 or 20-year-old man, first name George. He was Sri Lankan. His last name was complicated with many letters, as many Sri
Hmm.
Lankan last names are. He
Yeah.
literally couldn't pronounce his own last name.
Oh.
And our amazing instructor and facilitator, who's a speech language pathologist, the late Bob Kroll, brilliant, literally coached him through sounding out every single sound of his last name.
Mm,
It probably took him at least 15 minutes, but he did it. It was amazing. And so I mentioned this because as I went through this program, a couple things happened. One, I felt fortunate that my stutter wasn't as bad as some in that same
hmm.
environment. George is one example of that.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Two, I was intervening relatively early. And then 3, I began to help others. So
Mm.
there was another gentleman, well-educated, in his mid-20s, couldn't land a job because he just couldn't perform in a job interview.
Mm.
And he became like my big brother, and I was his little brother, and we would trade like crib notes, which was fun. But I mention this because um, the next summer, I went back to summer camp, but not the Speech and Stuttering Institute. I went to an overnight camp, had a blast. And each section at the camp put on a theatrical performance. Could have been Peter Pan, could have been Alice in the Wonderland, could have been Chicago, like whatever. The section that I was in, we got to do what was called the summer review. Like it was essentially an SNL show,
Right.
the Saturday Night Live like comedy skit show that poked
Mhm.
fun at stuff that happened at camp that summer. Love it. Totally up my alley. I didn't know as much when I was 14, but now I do.
Yeah.
And the reason I mention this is because here's another awkward moment. I ended up having a fairly large role in this production. And so I was picked along with 2 or 3 others to go down to the dining hall for during dinner to do a commercial and a skit to invite everyone up to a mandatory evening program. And as I was preparing, there was a line that I was given to say a character's name, and I couldn't pronounce the same name. I was George in the Speech and Stuttering Institute class. I couldn't say my own name. And
Mm.
like people around me were like, what's gotten into you? Like, what's going on? And the time pressure, and we went on. Even though I couldn't deliver my line, we went on. And I was in
Yeah.
front of 450 people, and it was my turn to deliver my line, and I tripped over, stumbled over, stuttered
Mm.
the last name of my character 3-4 times, forced it out, whatever. And it was beautiful and liberating
Mm.
because my worst nightmare came true. I stuttered in front of 450 people, and it was amazing. It was
Mm.
amazing because I failed and nobody died. I didn't die. Nobody seemed to notice or care. I was like, that was great. Like I messed up
Yeah.
and like I didn't die. And I went
Yeah.
on and did the production that night, and it was brilliant. And
Yeah.
I remember that feeling of elation and jubilation after I did that thing. And so I just want to like, I loved it, came to mind as you were sharing, Henna,
Yeah.
because I love what you said around, vulnerability is a notch up or two from awkwardness.
Mhm.
But I think if there's one thing I'd love to share with all those who are listening, it's take that modest, reasonable risk,
Mhm.
and see what happens.
Yeah, I love, 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 love. I feel like, and I imagine both of us do this in our work is we don't often give enough airtime to, in your case, you lived out your worst case scenario, but even if you don't have a chance to live it out, we can play it out mentally, right? We can play it out to its worst conclusion. And often when we actually allow ourselves to do that, sometimes it's as bad as we worry it will be. Often it's not, right? If you really
Mm,
get real about, okay, if it goes like this, am I going to be fired? If I'm fired, will I not be able to find another job? If I don't find another job, will I become homeless on the street? Like, play it all the way out, play it all the way till the end. Give me the thing that is haunting you until the depths of the earth. And then let's play it out again, but be realistic, right? Like,
mm.
realistically, I once heard a coach, I can't remember if it was honestly, if it was me or if I just heard somebody else say it. They said, "Isn't this bad when you forget if like, did somebody coach me with this or did I just hear it on a podcast?"
Let's just say somebody else came
Awkward.
up with it. Yeah, yeah.
But it was some version of, okay, let's just say you lost your job, you couldn't get another job, you had to move back in with your parents. Your parents are like, "You've been here too long, we're kicking you out." You end up in a homeless shelter. And then she looked at me and said, we're just going to pretend it's me because I don't even remember. She looked at me and said, "Henna, how long until you'd be running that homeless shelter?" I was like, an hour, right? Like, that's just my wiring, right? I wouldn't be able to just sit there and take it. And she said, of course, the same way you wouldn't let that entire outcome play out, because every step of the way you'd be making adjustments until it felt okay again. And that is true of
Mm,
speaking up at work. That is true of embracing your awkward at work. You are not going to likely, again, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but it is unlikely that your worst case scenario will play out in the way that you think, because you will make adjustments along the way. You always have, and you always will.
Yeah. I love that. One is I encourage folks to do that, potentially try it on your own, but maybe with a talking partner or a coach to help facilitate that and make it a bit safer. And I think, again, the other thing is when you actually are able to articulate, name, embrace your worst fear, all of a sudden it may have less power over you.
Yeah. I find that's true often, right? Just name it to tame it. Just get it out of there, release it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, look at that. The grip has loosened.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Henna, thank you so much. I know you are in crunch time and every minute and breath matters at this moment.
Hence the bag of chocolate.
Thank you for joining us. We'll put up our books again. This is Speak Up Culture.
Besties.
And this is, yes, slap hands. Good Awkward. Henna, such a treat. I was so looking forward to this. And I'm glad we did it. And you certainly, all the things that I thought this would be, it was, and more. So thank you.
Made it awkward in a good way. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. Yes. Well,
grateful to know you. Grateful for our friendship, and grateful for both of these books to be in everyone's hands. I hope you love reading them as much as I think we both loved writing them. So
yes,
can't wait.
Beautiful. All please wish Henna well with her launch and check out her book, Good Awkward. It comes out in a week. Pre-order it now, pre-order it later, and share it. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon.